Link channel. Good afternoon, everyone. Yesterday we learned about healthy and unhealthy expression of emotion by Dr. Tulika Pandey. Today we learn about positive and negative emotion as well as emotional development. So to continue, first of all we are talking about emotions. What are emotions? According to Robbins and Judge 2013, emotion is an intense feelings that are directed at someone or something, and there are some features of emotions like strong feelings directed towards some specific target, reactions to an event, fleeting, come and go quickly, action oriented, energizing a person to act. There are some basic emotions. Rene Descartes identified six basic emotions like wonder, love, hate, desire, joy, and sadness. There are four areas of development because human beings develop in four different aspects of growth. The areas are all interconnected. So when one is affected, it may influence the others. Four areas are physical, social, intellectual, and emotional. Emotional development involves the recognition and expression and of feelings and emotions. In general sense, emotional development involves learning what feelings and emotions are, understanding how and why they occur, recognize your own feelings and these are those of others, and developing effective ways for managing those feelings. Emotional development begins at birth, as we know very well. Emotional development is a complex process that begins in infancy and continues through adulthood. The first emotion that can be recognized in babies include joy, anger, sadness, and fear. As children's sense of self develops, more complex emotions like shyness, surprise, elation, embarrassment, shame, guilt, pride, and empathy emerge. School age children and young people are still learning to identify emotions, understand why they happen, and how to manage them appropriately. Some expression includes several components such as physical responses like heart rate, breathing, and hormone levels, behavioral displays of emotion, feelings that children and young people recognize, learn to name thoughts and judgment associated with feelings, action, signals. For example, a desire to approach, escape, or fight. Influence on emotional expression included that values and beliefs about appropriate and inappropriate ways of expressing emotions that children and young people learn from families and educators. How effectively children and young people's emotional needs are usually met. It's also influence children and young people's temperaments. Additionally, cultural norms, emotional behaviors that children and young people have learned through observation or experience. And lastly, the extent to which families are under various kinds of stress. The rate of emotional development in children and young people varies from person to person. Some children may show a high level of emotional skill development while quite young, whereas others may still be developing the capacity to manage their emotions well into adolescence. Emotional development and sense of self. It's an important thing that a person's sense of self is strongly influenced by their perception of themselves, as we seem to ourselves, which we seems to others. So knowing that they can be successful at what they do allows children and young people to feel competent and confident, which in turn affects their emotional development. Children and young people who don't have many experiences of success can experience disappointment more often, which can lead to development of a negative sense of self. By being supported to learn to value their own strengths and efforts as well as those of others, children and young people develop resilience to bounce back from challenge and hardship. Uh, Now we are talking about process of emotional development. So the process of emotional development is not linear but cyclical. It starts with the infant starting to understand what emotions are and labeling those emotions. This is followed by becoming aware of the emotions within oneself, then recognizing the emotions in other people and learning to regulate one's emotional expression. The appropriate and inappropriate ways of expressing one's emotions, and finally learning higher ways of coping or developing more sophisticated ways of handling emotions and developing emotional quotient. Their emotional development has an enormous impact on their overall development in their lifetime, as all of us might have observed or experienced. Children display positive emotions when their needs are met, they are well fed, soothed, comforted, and physically held. They display negative emotions when they are in distress of any sort, when they are hungry, wet, cold, etc. As early as this period, they are not able to manipulate their emotions or regulate about how they may want to express their emotions. Basic emotions are same across cultures. Infants from India, UK, Australia, Africa all display some basic common emotions. These are emotional development cycle. Understand what emotions are, labeling emotional self-awareness, then recognizing others people emotions. Additionally, emotional self-regulation. Lastly, higher order coping, developing EQ. This is the cycle of emotional development. So, this has led many researchers to conclude that infants across cultures are born with the ability to display basic emotions like contentment, sadness, etc. Uh, this is the study of Sullivan and Lewis 2003, Ackerman and Isaac 2004, Weinstein, Swasky, and Breakstone 2020. Additionally, non-verbal coding of emotions is fairly consistent across cultures, ages, and lifespan. Carol Isaac's work has helped developmental psychologists to understand the development of primary emotions, like the emotions that emerge within the first 6 months after birth. Immediately after birth, babies show contentment by smiling, interest by inquisitively looking people and objects, and distress by crying in discomfort or hunger or pain. So, by the time they are 3 months of age, they show contentment in the form of joy at the sight of a loved one. Interest turns into surprise, as in a game of peek-a-boo, and distress turns into negative emotions like sadness when a loved one leaves, and disgust when experiencing some fall test. So then comes anger at around 4 to 6 months of age, and fear is the last of all to develop. Uh, we are discuss about primary emotions. So, what is the primary emotions? As the name suggests, primary emotions are the first emotions that are felt when something happens. Imagine that you find out you won a competition, and your primary emotion may be to feel extreme joy. Or if you receive some bad news that you were not expecting, you may feel a surge of sadness. These primary emotions are the body's first response, which is directly connected to the event or stimulus. So, primary emotions are often very strong, which makes them easy to identify. They are thought to be instinctive, primal, and sensitive. Additionally, primary emotions are adaptive as they make us react in a certain way without the emotion being contaminated or analyzed by thoughts or habits. That's it. As time goes on, the primary emotion is likely to fade since we struggle to connect the same emotion with the event because our emotions have changed. Many times we feel it. Psychologist Paul Ekman identified six primary emotions. For example, anger, disgust, fear, happiness, sadness, and surprise. He theorized that these human emotions are innate and shared by everyone across cultures. Ekman later expanded this to include emotions such as pride, shame, embarrassment, and excitement. Similarly, another psychologist named Robert Plutchik identified eight primary emotions, which he grouped into four pairs of polar opposites like joy, sadness, anger, fear, trust, disgust, and surprise, anticipation. He famously developed the feeling, uh, the feelings will to display these emotions alongside the secondary emotions. So, what is secondary emotion? Secondary emotions are the emotions that are often felt after the primary emotions has been experienced. They are the reactions to our primary emotions and are often habitual or learned responses. For example, after feeling the primary emotion of anger, you may feel the secondary emotion of shame. Afterward, instead of feeling joy, you may feel relief or pride. Instead of feeling fear, you may feel hateful. So, secondary emotions are thought to arise from higher cognitive processes and come after the primary emotion. The purpose of secondary emotion is to cover up the sensitive primary emotions with something less sensitive. In this way, they are a way of protecting the self from being vulnerable. Some of the secondary emotions can lead to more hurt and pain as they build up over time, especially if they are emotions such as guilt, shame, resentment, frustration, and remorse. These emotions are often learned in childhood from parents or other people in our lives. Similarly, secondary emotions are often harder to name than primary emotions as they saturate the primary emotion with complex reactions. They can influence your behavior, increase the intensity of your reactions, and last for much longer than primary emotions. Now, difference between primary versus secondary emotions. The difference. What is the difference between primary emotions and secondary emotions? The main difference between primary and secondary emotion is that primary emotions are how we react to events and situations, whereas secondary emotions are reactions to how we feel. For example, feeling shame, secondary, which are secondary emotions, about feeling fear, those are primary emotions, in a certain situation. The distinction helps in understanding emotional reactions and their underlying causes more deeply. If you are unsure as to whether you are feeling a primary or secondary emotion, ask yourself if the emotion is directly a reaction or not. If it is a direct reaction, it is likely a primary. If it is not a direct reaction, it is likely secondary. We can also ask ourselves whether the emotions resides after the initiating event resetted. If the emotions was strong at first but has since diminished, it is likely a primary emotion. If the emotion continues long after the event and interferes with your abilities in the present, it is likely secondary. Below are some other main differences between primary and secondary emotions. These are primary emotions are instinctive and natural, while secondary emotions are learned or habitual. Primary emotions are functional, while secondary emotions are protective. Primary emotions can be painful or pleasurable, but secondary emotion can be better controlled than primary emotions. Primary emotion can be harmful when reacted to, but secondary emotion do not listen to what the emotions are asking. Primary emotions are sensitive and vulnerable, while secondary emotion comes from a place of learning. For example, I should not feel sad or I should not feel any anger. This is not the same as self-control. Similarly, primary emotions are rooted in the deeper parts of the brain, while secondary emotions are motivated by pain reduction. Primary emotion can help keep us connected with others, while secondary emotions linger around long after the event has happened. Primary emotion can help guide our actions, while secondary emotions generally leads to distance and disconnect from our goals, values, and people. These are some primary emotions and secondary emotions. Primary emotions is joy, and secondary emotions hopeful, proud, excited, delighted. These are the action and reaction. In short, in simple way, we can say that primary emotions are action and secondary emotion are reactions. So joy, if you feel joy, the secondary emotions are hopeful, proud, excited, delighted. Just like fear, secondary emotions are anxious, insecure, inferior, panic, and for primary emotions of anger, the secondary emotions are resentment, hate, envy, jealous, annoyed. For sadness, secondary emotions are shame, neglectful, depression, guilty, isolated. Similarly, for surprise, it is shocked, dismayed, confused, perplexed. So we can say that secondary emotion tend to occur because we have judgments or beliefs about certain emotions. Someone may have grown up in a household where they were criticized for getting upset and showing raw emotions. Likewise, they may not have learned healthy ways to express their anger and may have witnessed their parents displaying anger in unhealthy ways, such as acting passive aggressive or jealous. When we observe and learn about our emotions, especially as a child, we can often carry his forward into adulthood, meaning that often our secondary emotions get in the way of our primary emotions. Secondary emotions are a way of being reactive and are not a form of self control. It means we do not take the time to notice or explore the emotions we are feeling. Instead, we may just want it to go away or be buried at any cost. We are likely to choose secondary emotions when we feel threatened, overwhelmed, or unsafe. When we act on secondary emotions, we tend to attack, criticize, demand, blame, withdraw, and resent others. These behaviors are protective and stop us from having our true feelings exposed. However, covering our true feelings with secondary emotions and behaviors can be damaging over time. It can lead to breakdown in relationships and push others away. For example, if someone you are close to hurts you, you may turn this hurt into hate, meaning you may blame and criticize them. Acting on secondary emotions alone may not solve any problem at all and can lead us to simply go around in circles. So it can be concluded that infants, of course, find it impossible to verbally report their feelings for the obvious lack of verbal skills. Nevertheless, some developmental psychologists believe that their facial expression may be a reliable indicator of their emotional experience. Carol Izard proposed the differential emotions theory. According to him, there are certain discrete emotions like anger, fear, joy, surprise, sadness, and disgust that emerge in fancy, and each emotion thereby had a corresponding facial expression. In his research, Hazard and his colleagues developed the maximally discriminative facial movement coding system, MAX and FX coding system, and explained that the facial experiences changes with different emotional experience. However, recent development in the field have questioned the simplicity of the explanation and propose a more nonlinear and complex picture of emotional development. So, emotion is widely studied and investigated in psychological discipline. It is a construct important for art, literature, and everyday life and is at the core of human experience. Traditionally, emotions are classified into as negative or positive, unpleasant or pleasant, activated or deactivated, and so on. Double categorizations, however, are difficult to reconcile with certain developments in emotion research. People have been studying emotions for thousands of years, Given the heavy focus on feelings, it's not surprising that we know quite a bit about them. What is surprising is the lack of understanding around the obligation of both emotions for healthy functioning. Emotions have long been an important topic of human interactions and society, and have hence been extensively studied in the field of psychological discipline. Maybe the first notable scientific attempt on emotion was Darwin's. Darwin's notion of emotion as expressive and as physiological states has strongly influenced subsequent investigations of emotion. Consequently, emotion researchers have emphasized physiological aspect of emotions, particularly facial expression. Ekman's, who is the psychologist, Ekman's research suggests that there are universal emotion based on cross-cultural recognition of facial expressions. Although there are cultural differences in display rule for expressing emotions. Six basic emotions, as we know that sadness, fear, disgust, anger, surprise, and happiness have been identified as universal. This opinion is widely accepted among emotion researchers. In another early attempt to understand emotions, Wundt 1897 proposed that all emotions can be described by three dimensions, which are pleasurable to non pleasurable, arousing to moderating, and strained to relaxed. Later, Skosberg 1954 refined these three dimensions into pleasantness, unpleasantness, attention, rejection, and level of activation. Dimensional models of emotion are based on the assumption that all emotions involve the same interconnected system for emotion states. Still, the currently dominant models are the two-dimensional models, mm, the circumplex model and the vector model. The positive activation, negative activation model, which contains two dimensions, positive to negative balance, and high to low activation. In most of these models, balance is one important dimension along which a specific emotion is categorized as positive or negative. Indeed, the field of scientific studies on emotion has rested and evolved on the assumption that emotions are either positive or negative. So the question is, what are the positive emotions and what are the negative emotions? So the positive emotions are emotions that we typically find pleasurable to experience. The Oxford Handbook of Positive Psychology defines them as pleasant or desirable situational responses, distinct from pleasurable sensation and undifferentiated positive affect. This is the positive emotions. Basically, this definition is stating that positive emotions are pleasant responses to our environment or our own internal dialogue that are more complex and targeted than simple sensations. Similarly, the question is what are the negative emotions? On the other hand, negative emotions are those that we typically do not find pleasurable to experience. Negative emotions can be defined as an unpleasant or unhappy emotion which is induced in individuals to express a negative effect towards an event or person. If an emotion discourages and drags you down, then it's most likely a negative emotion. Some We can talk about some positive and negative emotions. Like example, positive and negative emotions will will vary uh, based on who you ask. Even the definition of an emotion can vary based on who answers the questions. However, you define emotion, discriminating between the two is an innate process. We seem to just know which emotions are positive and which are negative. Uh, some common positive emotions are, uh, I think, I we can talk about some positive emotions like love, joy, satisfaction, contentment, interest, amusement, happiness, serenity, and wonder, etc. Similarly, there are some negative emotions, the most commonly felt, which are like fear, anger, disgust, sadness, rage, loneliness, depressed, and annoyance or irritation. When we experience negative emotions, we generally are not engaging in actions that align with our values and our experience is not meeting our needs. When this happens, we must take a step back, pause, and find ways to attend to this useless need. On the other hand, when we experience positive emotions, it signals that we engage in action or activities that support with our values. They also suggest that the experience is meeting our needs. Therefore, we ought to approach them more eagerly and do them more often in these situations. Imagine an activity that makes you feel joy. Naturally, you would want to move towards that activity and do more of it, helping you further satisfy your needs. Positivity and negativity in the emotion research, which are primarily research suggests that there are simultaneous positive and negative outcomes associated with specific emotions. Emotions can also have conflicting consequences. A positive emotion can lead to a negative consequences, and a negative emotions can lead to a positive consequence. For example, I think we don't know about it, but we are feel it. We have felt it already. For example, although happiness is considered as a positive and desirable emotion, research has revealed a darker side of happiness. According to Gruber et al. 2011 study, the detection of happiness is not always positive, and experiencing happiness is not always a good thing. People who pursue happiness strongly tend to be more depressed, miserable, and unhappy. This is the research. Further, aspirants geared up with happy emotions displayed significantly more selfness than those geared up with sad emotions. People placing a high importance on pursuing happiness reported significantly more loneliness compared to those neutral in pursuing happiness. More Tamir and Bigman 2014 demonstrate that there are benefits that typically prompt unpleasant feelings. This advocates that so called positive emotions can have a negative influence on people and that negative emotions can have a positive influence. Secondly, regarding concurrent positive and negative emotions, people reported simultaneously feeling happy and sad in various situations. In spite of that, sadness and happiness were treated as opposites. Simultaneous emotions have also been reported in response to winning in disappointing fashion. Example, a victory that could have been better and losing in relieving fashion. Defeat that could have been worse. Thus, despite the traditional emotion framework that conceptualizes emotions emotionally as being either positive or negative, the literature suggests that a more flexible approach is needed. This might be why emotion researchers have long argued that the same emotions can serve different functions. Indeed, researchers have found both positive and negative effects of a positive mood and of a negative mood. Bagosi is the researcher. In 1999, examines the balance of emotion cross-culturally and found that Easterners tended to report more concurrently reported positive and negative emotions than Westerners. Further, Miyamoto et al. 2010 investigated the occurrence of positive and negative emotions in both Japan and the United States. Japanese participants reported feelings more mixed emotions than American in predominantly positive situations, but not in predominantly negative situations in which there were no differences. So, some cross cultural research cast doubt on the classification of emotions as strictly positive or negative. Positive and negative in one culture can be considered positive in another. Individualistic cultures believe that self-reflective emotions that reflect on the individual's own actions, is called individualistic cultures. So, cultures believe that self-reflective emotions concerning a person doing well are good, whereas collectivist cultures believes that self-reflective emotions concerning that one's action need improvement and desirable. For example, uh, those from individualistic cultures tend to consider pride as a desirable emotion, and those from collectivist cultures tend to consider guilt a desirable emotions. This is in line with cultural differences in regulatory focus. Overall, the results further supports that not all positive emotions are interpreted positively by all people and nor all are negative emotions interpreted negatively. Indeed, uh, Sai and I et al. 2006 reported that emotion interpreted negatively. Sai 2006 and 7 have shown that ideal affect, the affective state that people desire feeling, varies, varies across cultures. Americans value high arousal positive affective states such as excitement more, whereas East Asian values low arousal positive affective states like such as calm or peacefulness more. These are some researches on emotions which shows that cultures affect emotions affected by cultures. So therefore, the important thing is, are negative emotions necessary? No one, no one want to show negative emotions. The question is, so are negative emotions necessary for us? As we know that we need positive emotions to function effectively, grow and thrive. So if it is basically universally unpleasant for us to experience negative emotions and universally pleasant and desirable to experience positive emotions, do we actually need the negative ones at all? As it turns out, yes, we need it. Although they are not pleasant to experience, negative emotions really are necessary for healthy life. This is true for two big reasons. First, negative emotions give us a counterpoint to positive emotions. Without the negative, would the positive emotion still feel as good? And, negative emotions serve evolutionary purposes, encouraging us to act in ways that boost our chances to survival and help us grow and develop as people. Some negative effect whose develop our positive emotions like anger to fight against problems, fear to protect us from danger, anticipation to look forward and plan, similarly surprise to focus on new situation, joy to remind us what's important, and sadness to connect us with those we love, and trust to connect with people who help. Further, disgust to reject what is unhealthy. So, without fear, would be here today. Without fear, would you be here today, or would you have engaged in some risky practice, putting yourself in unnecessary danger? Without disgust, would you have been able to abstain from putting any of the many harmful substances that you had access to as a toddler? Your experiences are more important. And unpleasant as they may be, it can't be denied that negative emotions serve important purposes in our life. So, the question once again, is it true that an individual will only feel stress in negative situation? The answer is, although you may think of stress as a solidly negative emotions or is response to situation, it's actually quite common for people to experience stress in neutral and positive situation as well. In fact, many experiences commonly thoughts of as positive can contribute huge amounts of stress to our lives. Here are just a few examples of positive experience that can bring us stress. The first is planning for upcoming wedding. It can bring us stress. Yes. preparing Preparing to move to somewhere you are excited to live. The holidays, especially with family, having a baby, starting an exciting new job. It's also stressful. So it's perfectly natural to feel stress in all of these situations, even though you would probably classify them as happy and positive. It's yet another example of the interplay between positive and negative that gives our life balance. I think you can understand. Uh, the next question is it true that an individual will only feel stress in negative situation? Counterpart of first questions. So, although you may think of stress as a solidly negative emotion or response to a situation, it's actually quite common for people to experience stress in neutral and positive situation as well. Uh, so, facilitating emotional conflict processing, helping us to make sense of incongruent or conflicting emotional information. In other words, negative emotions can help us figure the emotional problems. Facilitating cognitive conflict processing, aiding us in comprehending incongruent or conflicting cognitive information. In other words, negative emotion can also help us make sense when we receive confusing signals. So, reducing the experience of empathy, which can help protect us from getting too involved with others and stay focused on our goals. This is also study whose these studies are Kiao, etc. in 2017, I think. So both have impactful roles to play in our brain. Positive and negative emotions also play in our important role in our brain, and these roles are complementary rather than competitive. Which are some study reported that emotions through facial expression is not an easy task. We studied in previous sometimes before facial expression about facial expression of emotions. So some study reported that emotions through facial expression is not an easy task. But why? Because some emotions are very complex and can't be expressed through facial expression. And cultural factors influence emotional expression. Further, researchers have identified six universal emotions: anger, fear, sadness, happiness, disgust, and surprise, which can express by easy way. So, uses of emotions in the workplace. It is an important topic. Uses of emotions in the workplace. First of all, it is uses for employee selection. Emotions play an important role in jobs demanding high social interaction, and many employers make use of emotional intelligence to recruit people. Number two, we can say that decision making. In the decision making, People with instant positive moods are rapider at decision making and are better problem solvers. Some studies suggest that depressed people reach more accurate judgments, but they make poorer decisions because they are slower at processing information and tend to ponder all possible options rather than the most likely ones. And third, we can say creativity. Creativity is also important. So, good moods boost creativity. Is successful that it is because people experiencing positive moods are more flexible, are open in their thinking, and some believe that happy moods interfere with creativity. Uh, Number four, I think we can say that it is motivation. Positive emotions improve motivation, and it's also improve the motivation to help coworkers. And the fifth is leadership. Leaders are more effective when they are excited, enthusiastic, and active. By arousing emotions and linking them to an appealing vision, leaders increase the likelihood that managers and employees alike will accept change. The sixth point is negation. Good managers use anger to negotiate effectively only when there is sufficient information about the opponent. And further, feeling bad about past negotiations can affect future negotiations. And number seven, we can say that it is customer service. Emotions of the employee affect customer service, thereby leading to customer satisfaction and returns. Further, similarly, employees' emotions can be passed on the customer, known as emotional contamination. And number eight, we can say that it is job attitudes. Number eight is job attitudes. So, positive mood at work has a positive impact on personal life, and positive personal life has a positive impact on work life. These are cycle. So, number nine, we can say unusual workplace behavior. So, behaviors that violate organizational norms and threaten the organization and its members. For example, jealousy and anger, which are more common in the workplace. So, people who feel negative emotions are more likely than others to engage in short term deviant behaviors such as gossiping. So, negative emotions and moods can escalate negative behaviors. And number 10, improving safety and prevention of injury. It is the important thing or important point for us because bad mood causes accidents when we fail. So bad mood causes accidents, and individuals in negative moods tend to be more anxious, which can make them less able to cope effectively with hazards. And negative mood distract employees, leading to carelessness. So, I think it is helpful for you. We can talk about some topic or some strategy which can change negative emotions into positive. This is the last topic. So, ever had one of those days when you can't seem to get motivated to make healthy choices? If so, you are not alone. Many people think motivation in the same things as willpower, but it is more than that. Willpower is only part of the puzzle and it is usually a short term solution. Lasting motivation comes from positive thinking and self confidence. You may have negative thoughts that stand in your way without realizing it. So find out how you can identify these are some common negative thoughts and change them into positive motivation. First is all or nothing thinking. All or nothing thinking happens when you believe there are only two possible outcomes, which are success or failure. This could lead you to set too many goals because you believe this is the only path to success. It could also lead you to abandon your goals when mistake happens. You believe you have already failed. This is common during the holiday season or while on vacation. Thinking your progress in black and white can be discouraging. So you can try remind yourself of your small successes and ways you are making gradual progress. And further, you can talk using positive self talk. Self talk, that conversation you have in your own hand, has a big impact on attitude. Positive self talk can help you feel more confident in the face of challenges. You may be used to speaking more kindly to others than to yourself. So, saying I can do it or it's okay to make a mistake may feel forced at first. To practice positive self talk, imagine you are encouraging a loved one. The most important thing is blaming yourself or others. It's very common to blame yourself or others when things don't go as planned. So, focusing on the blame game is distracting and leads to unhelpful negative thoughts. This makes it hard to see a way forward. So, you can try many things in life are outside your control. So, give yourself a break and focus instead on the positive things you can do to pursue your goals. And further you can focus on problem solving and how you can keep moving forward. One more important thing is emotional decision making. Emotions, both positive and negative, can affect our attitude and our choices. It's common, so it's important to not let negative emotions drive decision making. For example, you might not feel like making a healthy choice after a long and stressful day, but sometimes that just the thing that could turn your mood around. So you can try practice mindfulness to check in with yourself, understand how you feel now, and think about how you will feel when you stick to your healthy habit. So you can make a mindful choice instead of reacting out of emotion, and remember to give yourself healthy rewards. So I think, and one more thing is overlooking the positives. Sometimes you have high expectation for yourself. This makes it easy to focus too much on the negatives. For example, if your goal was to walk 2 miles but you only completed 1 mile, you might tell yourself that it did not go well. But the big picture is that you got out there and did something physically active. Ignoring the positive makes it hard to stay motivated. So you can try. Remember not only how you would like to improve, but also what's going well. So, dear student, I think as always, I hope you leave this piece with a little more knowledge, identifying, accepting, and managing your emotions, both positive and negative, is such an important task for living a healthy and happy life. So, use what you have learned here to enhance your understanding of your own feelings and the feelings of others, and commit to greater awareness of management of your own emotional state. You won't regret it. Uh, Thank you so much. We will meet once again. Thank you so much.